basically the inspiration for this presentation came at the Second World Congress of Camino Associations in Santiago de Compostela a few months ago, when I noticed that quite a few of European associations weren't aware of the possibilities offered by the EU funding. Just a second, let me just turn off the radio in the background. Okay, I'm back. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of EU projects and EU funding when it comes to Camino associations. I've noticed that we have our American friends present as well. You cannot directly take advantage of the EU funding opportunities, but you can, and you are definitely welcome to take advantage of the projects funded through EU money, through a variety of cooperation with European associations. Some of the ideas I'll present during this presentation. So let me start. First, what shall we be talking about? This is just the basic guidelines about EU funding for people who have a little of no experience with that. Although some that do have experience perhaps might learn something as well. So it tries to point you in the right direction and to provide you with some basic steps when it comes to EU funds and EU programs. Why do we need funds? Basically, in order to do what most of us are aiming to do, and that is to help more people attain that Camino experience. Funding is something which is required, although quite a lot of us are using working a lot on voluntary basis. In order to do more, funding is required. One other thing I want to emphasize that all the content within this presentation represents my personal opinion and impressions, and there is no way that I'm connected to any institutions, particularly not speaking in any sort of official mode when it comes to EU institutions. Okay, what does EU have to do with the Camino? If you remember this quote, Europe was made on the Pilgrim Road to Compostela. It's originally by a German author, Goethe, but it's also inscribed in several languages at Porta do Camino at Santiago de Compostela when you're entering the old town just before the cathedral. That is a monument which was raised there to commemorate the proclamation of Camino de Santiago as the first cultural route of Europe, which was in 1987. Historically, that fact is very much true. Europe was made on the pilgrim roads to Compostela. To give you a little bit of background, in Middle Ages, in 10th century, when the whole story, 9th century, when the whole story started, there was no awareness that you as individual living in any part of Europe are a part of something greater. Basically, your entire life was around 20, 30 kilometers from the place you were born. And that was valid for most people. Pilgrimages were the, let's say, form of tourism in medieval times. Walking to Santiago de Compostela and back on foot required you to basically help you become aware that you're part of something greater. It helped foster a common European identity and common European heritage. And these are, in my opinion, two things that EU likes Camino de Santiago. By likes, I mean proclaiming it through a variety of strategies when it comes to cultural tourism, but also putting their money where the mouth is. EU has financially supported the Camino through a variety of programs and a variety of tenders, and not only sizable amounts for the Camino routes in Spain and Portugal, but also throughout Europe as well. Some of which you'll see in the materials that I managed to dig up. In 2024, EU has proclaimed to be the year of cultural roots. Like I said, Camino is the first proclaimed European cultural route, and that opens a bunch of opportunities for promotion, but also for funding of the Camino-related projects throughout Europe. When it comes to EU funding, there are basically two main categories. One is programs. Programs basically provide general framework and general funding for a specific topic or a range of topics, some or themes. Some examples of the programs are Interreg, cross-border cooperation programs, Creative Europe, which basically name speaks for itself, and Erasmus, which covers a variety of education related, working with young people, but also cross-European cooperation themes and topics. So within the general framework, there are specific calls, specific tenders, grants, however you want to call them, which outline, which basically you apply specific projects for within for a specific goal. This is where you apply. Like I said, the overall program gives you an outline, and specific goal gives you specific guidelines and topics within that general framework. There are a couple of, let's say, tips and buzzwords when it comes to EU projects, which are valid for almost all projects. One is capacity. So the question that needs to be answered within a project application: does the applicant have the staff and the revenue to handle large projects? What does that mean in practice? Well, if you don't have any employees, and if you have, let's say, 50,000 euros in revenue in the last financial year, it's not likely you'll be awarded 1 million euro project. Why? Because you cannot demonstrate capacity, that you have staff who can handle that amount of money, that amount of work related to that kind of money, nor experience working with sizable sums. That is not valid for all projects, but for a vast majority, establishing capacity is very important. Partners. Most European projects require partners from different countries. The idea is to promote cooperation throughout Europe and European members of European Union. Sustainability is another factor. EU doesn't like to see projects which stop after the funding ended. Although that can happen in practice, I cannot judge how frequently, but I've seen it happen on several occasions. Basically, the EU likes to see that the project can continue after the funding ends. So the project is sustainable. Green and digital is part of the current policy and strategy. So even if you're, let's say, organizing a conference and you say that you limit the use of paper and promote the use of recycling bins, that's how you can cover green and digital. It doesn't have to be only green projects or only about digital projects. One tip when it comes to writing applications: it's, in my opinion, highly important to use the vocabulary used in the call. So don't use the words that may come logically to you. Try to use the vocabulary from the call, specifying the goals, specifying the priorities, specifying instructions. In most, and this is a very useful thing, in most European calls, you'll actually get a special document or separate document specifying how are individual project submissions evaluated. So which element gives you how specific number of points. So obviously make sure that when you're writing an application and when you're going through everything, that you're looking at it from the standpoint of the evaluator. Do you elaborate specifically and concretely specific elements for which points are awarded? Another important thing is to emphasize tolerance and openness to all. That means no form of discrimination whatsoever. There are generally two types of funding when it comes to EU. One is directly from EU, so evaluation is done in Brussels or relevant EU institutions. Another way is through EU funds, which are distributed through national governments of EU member states. For example, EU can give certain country 100 million euros to protect and to promote cultural heritage. Then the National Ministry of Culture writes a number of calls reflecting certain points on certain local priorities, breaking down those funds in smaller grants, which can be 50, 100,000 euros, depending on a specific case. Sometimes it might make more sense to start with a smaller 5 to 20 euro grants, which are opened by the national ministries and national institutions to practice and learn and to get a better sense of the methodology when it comes to writing applications. Uh, Now we'll talk about specific programs which might be useful for the standpoint of a Camino associations. The first is European Social Fund. Inside the presentation, that will send a link to this presentation to everybody. There is a link to the homepage for the European Social Fund. This is basically primarily aimed at non-governmental organizations or NGOs, depending on how they're registered in specific countries. And it offers a wide range of opportunities when it comes to Camino associations. When it comes to project ideas, I would suggest to keep an open mind because we can say, for example, that we need the money in order to put up signs on the Camino route in our country, in Europe. But there is no project which is basically signing a cultural route or putting up signage for any kind of tourist or cultural route. That shouldn't discourage us. Signage can be a component of the project, for example, aimed at promoting cultural heritage among young people. So one component can be signage. Generally, Camino is something that can be applied to a variety of themes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. A nice thing about European Social Fund is that it can be more flexible regarding capacity. Like I said, usually you can't get 250,000 euros unless you have a few full-time employees and at least 300,000 euros in revenue. But one example that I was made aware of that through European Social Fund, a Belgian non-governmental organization working with children with difficulties, got 250,000 in just 3 months after they were formally founded. They didn't exist legally before that. They did, however, demonstrate that they were active before in a non-formal setting, and they had the skills and the capacity within their members to be able to realize the set project goals. But formally, they didn't have the requirements which were usually given on a variety of projects. Creative Europe is something which is open now. There are lots of opportunities regarding cultural heritage, which obviously is directly tied to the Camino. It can also be a little bit more flexible regarding capacity. I've put in a link for currently available calls, and there is also help and support available through national desks, which are usually based in the Ministry of Culture of EU member states. Okay, so here is Creative Europe. What project idea to apply? One suggestion would be to browse the projects that received funding before within Creative Europe, to look for ideas, to look for inspiration. Now, how can this idea or this project can be applied to something related to the Camino? Since this is also a little bit more money involved, and therefore a little bit more complex when it comes to application requirements, hiring a consultant is also advisable in this case. I don't know what is the situation in other European countries, but in Croatia, particularly for this particular project, we have decided to hire a consultant for Creative Europe. The cost is 2,000 euros in advance. So before, um, it's basically risk. It's a cost of writing the application and submitting the application. Should the project be successful, there is a 3% success fee. But there is a fixed cost of, like I said, in Croatia, 2,000 euros in order to apply. Another program is called Interreg. It's about cross-border cooperation between obviously two neighboring countries. They don't need to share always physical border. For example, there is a sea border between Croatia and Italy, but there is an existing Interreg for Croatia and Italy. It's important that the partners come from these two countries. They don't have to be exact neighbors or share the border directly. Usually, it's much larger amounts, over 800,000 euros. And it's not likely that individual Camino association, even I think the biggest one from Netherlands, could meet the formal requirements from this. But this is an idea that we have that we had, and we arranged with several local municipalities in Croatia. So we, as an association, cannot apply directly to this project, but we can work with a local municipality who can apply directly because they have a bunch of employees and usually a budget in millions. Therefore, their capacity is considered more than adequate. So the cooperation method is that they apply for the project and we help develop the project idea and do most of the work. Hiring a consultant in this case, or having somebody with a lot of relevant experience, is basically almost a must. In some cases in Croatia, local municipalities have a dedicated department within the city, or particularly within regional government, which is specialized in EU projects. And that department handles the application process. I mentioned before, there are, how to get a project idea to apply. Obviously, you need to look at specific programs and specific calls for specific priorities and guidelines. But there are some additional information which you might find useful. Here is a list of Erasmus projects, which is mainly education themed, but not only education themed. These are the projects that we managed to dig up, which are related to the Camino, from 5,000 to 190,000 euros. And the applicants that won the funding were basically very small NGOs. On the European EU funding and tender portal, there is a separate searchable database of awarded projects. So, for example, if you want to see which projects were awarded funds over the last decade, I think it goes back, for Creative Europe or Erasmus or any other project, you can just filter the database and it will show you a list with details about each project. As I said before, Camino is not only culture and not only cultural heritage. One of the priorities, for example, when it comes to EU funding in this current cycle, is projects related to young people, particularly projects related to promoting common European identity and heritage towards young people. So during the Second World Congress in Santiago, I heard a lot of interesting stuff about existing programs run by Camino associations in Netherlands and Lithuania, who are working with young people and getting them involved in the Camino routes in their countries. Another idea, and a wide range basically of ideas when it comes to health. I'm aware that in Spain there were two programs done, for example, for heart patients. So people who had problems with the heart condition. There was an organized ambulance with a team of doctors and nurses and a group of 20 or 30 patients who walked the Camino. And the medical staff monitored their condition on a daily basis. And of course, after 2 weeks of walking the Camino, they found that their medical condition improved significantly. Walking is, of course, required for very recommended for heart patients, but the stress-free environment of the Camino helps a lot as well. So this is just one potential topic, whether it's working for people with PTSD or in need of psychological type of help. Doing a theme program on the Camino is something that also makes sense. When it comes to a variety of media projects, whether it's online exhibitions, books, movies, when it comes to promoting the Camino, there are a variety of opportunities, as I mentioned before, in Creative Europe program. So, like I said, this is a brief outline. I'll be happy to take your questions. Just fire away. So the first question is when the meeting will end. Well, as far as my part is done now. One other thing I wanted to say is that during the meeting in Santiago, I noticed that there is quite a need for stronger cooperation between different Camino associations, for sharing of good practices, for some have skills that others are in need of. So connecting, and I've been working on an idea to build a platform which will make it much easier for to communicate and to share experiences to a mutual benefit. See some typing in the background. Also, another important thing, since Croatian associations is very interested to take advantage of all the opportunities for utilizing the available EU funding when it comes to not only promoting the Camino in Croatia, but throughout Europe. And basically, our goal is to help as many people as possible discover that magical Camino experience. So we will reach out to all of you with a short questionnaire that will basically provide some basic information about each of our association, which is who is interested in EU funding for potential partnership options. We will be starting with writing applications for several EU projects in the next year, and we will reach out to all of you who are interested in partnering with us on this as well. So questions? Yes, Gabriela, thank you. Actually, we had some experience before. Not successful, unfortunately, but you learned from your failures. So we did a project called Camino Danube with the Camino Association in Romania and Slovakia. The principle was a regional government in Croatia, Vukovar County. Unfortunately, it was within Creative Europe. Unfortunately, we were 3 points short. So we had 67 points and 70 was the minimum. But like I said, we learned from there. This is one example. We currently, there was a question, did we get any grants in Croatia? We are currently in the process of waiting a reply for several applications that we submitted for national funding. It's also EU money, but it's distributed through national ministries in Croatia. And we're waiting for a reply. For example, there is a national foundation in Croatia for civil society or NGOs, essentially. They are providing salary for staff of the NGO, 13,000 euros per year for a period of 3 years. So we applied for that. We managed to get a green light for first two administrative hurdles, and now we're waiting for reply over the next couple of months. Our goal is to apply for every possible opportunity, either directly or in partnership with local municipalities and regional governments. We had quite a lot of success in establishing this cooperation with the local governments and local municipalities in Croatia. They are quite eager to apply for EU funds. Usually they're short on ideas. So this is something that we managed to work with them. A lot of EU projects, particularly bigger ones, require they won't give you 100% of all the costs. They will give you 80% or 70%. So you have to provide together with your partners the rest. When local municipalities that we partnered with are basically willing to come up with the financing. So if there aren't any more questions, absolutely. I think, Peter, that I think the new initiative of Europa, Camino Europa, can definitely get a lot of opportunities for grants because cooperation between different countries is what EU wants, particularly for not only for let's say office cost or staff, but but uh, um, but also for a variety of projects that you can come up with. A question from Poland. Yes, most EU projects require pre-financing, but for example, for Creative Europe, at least in Croatia, which is definitely not the richest EU country or nowhere near the top, the 20% for Creative Europe is provided by the Croatian government. So if the project is awarded money, the government will provide you with 20%. But like I said, as an NGO, you probably cannot afford large projects or large grants, but working with local municipality who is interested in partnership, you can. And I know there are difficulties. I know in most cases you'll get a cold shoulder and no, we're not interested. But it only takes one. And I'm sure there is a likelihood that you will find somebody, mayor or a regional president or somebody in regional government who even walked the Camino or is interested in Camino and wants to walk the Camino, who might be more open to the idea. That's the success that we had. When we started developing Camino Croatia, uh, restoring the medieval routes from Croatia to Santiago de Compostela. PR is definitely a big aspect of the story, but not PR for us. PR for local partners, municipalities, and regional governments with whom we worked to develop this. Everybody will receive this presentation by email. And I will also prepare, like I said, a short questionnaire to create an informal database between association, obviously for all those who are interested, that we can use that database for potential partnerships in European projects. Not only, like I said, we will reach out to a lot of you as potential partners. All of you who are interested are more than welcome. But also we will share the information with everybody, so you can communicate directly and find partners within associations. In the email that we sent all of you, there is a link to Facebook group connecting Camino associations. So I invite you all, if you haven't, make sure that you join. We will start providing content and useful stuff there as well. Any more questions, please? If there aren't any questions here, I thank you very much for your time. I sincerely hope that you find it useful. And don't hesitate to reach out directly by email to us. We are definitely open to help in any way that we can to share what we learn. And we'll continue to do so.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward to receive your presentation, and we will work with it. I think we'll come back to you later in a later stage when we have established our new
status.
Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedran. Thank you, Vedran, also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marija. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.